3 years ago, I got a call from a young man who told me he was a graduate of a program in our school, the School of Leadership and Development, that he had completed the MBA in Economic Development, in Urban Economic Development, which focuses on not only, what I love about our economic development programs is they focus on not only teaching you business skills, solid business skills, but with the clear intention that you will help to serve the poor. So it's like, not business to go work for the corporate sector. I mean, you surely could take those skills if you wanted to and just go work for the corporate sector. But the idea is business to help communities in need develop. And so Jake Becker told me that he had graduated from that program, and he specialized in the urban sector, working in Philadelphia, with a commitment to working in Philadelphia. He was working in the Latino section of the city in an organization that does economic development at the time. We came, we met, we talked, and he really didn't know me. He found me on the web, he perhaps heard about me from someone else, but he called me and said, I just need to sit down and talk to someone who I think shares some of my interests and concerns, and maybe you can help give me some advice. And so 3 years later, we still meet about once or twice a year, and we still talk. And what I've always admired about Jake is his commitment to his work and to the city. His courage to step up and just identify people who he thinks he needs to know, both to serve his own development and to serve his work, and the way he lets God lead him in all that he does. So I've asked Jake to come and speak about his new role and the challenge that presented itself to him as soon as he came into this new role as the director of Spruce Hill Christian School that has merged with Center City Christian Academy.
City Center Academy.
City Center Academy.
Yes.
So he'll talk to you about that today. Welcome, Jake Becker.
So it's like in the middle of your residency, kind of a little tired, been talked at a lot. I have a sports background, and whenever I try to motivate myself on a wrestling mat, I would just even clap to myself while I'm going at it with my opponent. So I will get in, get clapping. So get some energy. I think we all need to clap again here. We're gonna. All right. Good. So I think the amazing thing that what you all are doing, we each try to do is figure out how we fit in the rest of the world. So this conversation, I hope that would first start off with me, just who I am, and then me trying to figure out how I fit into my context, my situation. And that's constantly evolving, constantly changing. It's a perpetual discussion that we're having with our spouses, our friends, the Lord, even ourselves. Who am I, and how do I fit? So for me, I moved to Philadelphia when I was 9 years old. I was the chubby white pastor's kid who moved into the city, and 4th grade was a tough year for me, getting accustomed to life in Philadelphia. I've been here ever since, so it's 25 years later, and this is my home, this is where I'm at, this is what I love, this is my calling. So I am in the city, I'm of the city, and I'm going to be here for a long time. My father was sort of a suburban, white, trained preacher and loved to teach the Bible, and I think was really trying to understand urban ministry when God called him into the Olney section of Philadelphia in 1989, and that's where I grew up. Our conversations at the dinner table were about Little League baseball and how do you make a church relevant in its neighborhood. And so that was a regular conversation that we've had. Now, I've seen enough people who have gone to seminary to say that's not for me, but it is for many folks. And so that's actually another question that I had to figure out. Well, I'm a Christian, I care about the city, and I don't want to go to seminary, so I want to do something else. So the MBA, actually, that I got at Eastern, I didn't know. My experience as an undergraduate was at the University of Pennsylvania, and those were sort of like corporate, like I'm going to go to New York, I'm going to make money, a lot of nice people, but that wasn't what I cared about. And yet I thought those skill sets can really be applied to the life around me. Good organizations make for healthy neighborhoods, make for healthy people. And so if I can lead an organization or be a part of an organization then we can have healthy communities and healthy neighborhoods. And so I've since seen how much of what you're studying, how much of what I've studied actually makes sense, but I didn't hear about it talked very much. Urban ministry was like whether you did youth ministry or whether you were a pastor. And like to just be an organizational leader in the city, like at least growing up, that wasn't a part of the conversation that I had. So for me, this was a unique way of thinking about making a difference in my hometown. I live in Germantown now with my wife and our 2 kids, and I've had my ups and downs of understanding, you know, where you live, where you send your kids to school, how you are a part of life in the city. Now, what will feed into my conversation at the school is this your hometown? Is this where you're from, or is this where you're ministering to? There's a constant discussion of, are you living with people, or are you serving with people, or are you ministering to people? And that's a real important conversation. There's a lot of class issues, there's a lot of race issues, there's a lot of culture issues that go into that, and you can offend people very quickly on either side of the aisle. You call somebody who they're not comfortable with appropriate language about ministry. They have a heart, but they don't know how to engage with people, and they're not ever used to having somebody actually do a missions trip to them. You know, like that they're always doing the missions trips to other people and with other people. And so that's a hard conversation for them to have, and they need grace. And then for those of us who, I guess for me at least personally, who in some ways looks and has very many aspects of my culture. My grandparents grew up lived 2 blocks away from here. Radnor and Wayne are very elite places, and my grandfather was an oil executive, and so he made some money and lived out here. But that wasn't my own experience. So balancing that, looking like the people who we're ministering to, and yet experiencing much of life of, you know, being the kid in Olney who kind of stuck out and, you know, got jumped a couple times, and that's okay. This is a good place for my son to see the city, to love the city as a beautiful place, and to not say that this is a place that needs you. So that's a conversation we've been having. So how did that happen for me, real quick? I cared more about sports than I did about academics. I was smart enough, I guess. I went to Central High School, then I got into Penn. I went into Penn because I wanted to wrestle, and they were very competitive athletically. So I did that for a couple of years. I did really well, and then God told me to quit. That was a really hard thing to do. I actually prayed that he'd injure me instead. I didn't want the humiliation of that. However, he did. When God asks you to do hard things for him, I think the decision itself is worth the decision. I think a lot of people say, well, I'm going to do this hard thing, I better get something at the end. And I think the experience of having a hard decision and putting your heart in faith is worth it unto itself. So after my junior year, after that life transition, I said, I don't know what I want to do. I've only been thinking about athletics and beating up the next guy. What do I do about my own life? And I said, well, I'd like to coach. I could teach, you know. And that went through a series of conversations and projects for myself. I looked at suburban-urban collaborations in some of my classes on the urban studies major. I said, I want to figure out the life I just grew up in, the life I just experienced. I interviewed a number of urban and suburban pastors for that one research project, and I got the chance to speak with Herb Wast, who's the pastor of Greater Exodus Baptist Church. And I asked him, while he was on the train between DC and Philadelphia, and this was right around the time when the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives was coming up, I said, so what is, just sort of as an aside, what is the major, one thing that you could do, if you could do anything? He said education. Education is the one place. And that wasn't the deciding factor for me, but that was a tipping point where I said, if I'm going to invest my one life, and this guy's been around the block a while, and he says education, if I can do that, that's to me a worthwhile decision. Well, I applied to the school district. I got a master's degree in education, and I was a social studies teacher, and it took them a year to even look at my application. So I graduated, they didn't even look at my application. I had to find a job in the in-between time, and I found that at Timothy Academy, which was in North Philadelphia. So I taught middle school for 2 years. After 1 year of teaching in the city, I realized that teaching wasn't for me. Teaching middle school was not for me, at least. And yet, there were so many amazing teachers there. And without speaking disparagingly of any leadership, I saw how critical leadership was. That if my role, if God was calling me, I could serve the servants, the folks who are on the front lines. If you know somebody's got your back, you will pour yourself out to the lives of kids and to the lives of whoever you're ministering to. And if it could be my opportunity to serve them, to enable them, to allow them to minister effectively, that was my call. And so very quickly, and through the course of events, God brought me to Eastern, and I did the program part-time for 3 years. I was at Esperanza Health Center after I stopped teaching, and I was first started off as their director of HIV care. I was the administrator there. They said, "You've never supervised adults." I said, "Well, I've worked with 13-year-olds. They said, "You've never written a grant." I said, "Well, I've written research papers." And they said in the interview, "What do you want to do for the rest of your life?" I said, "Well, actually, I want to sit in the seat that you're sitting in, executive director." She's like, "Wait, what?" I said, "No, not your seat specifically. I'm not here for you to hire me to take your job. But yet, in boldness, I want to lead a nonprofit organization someday. And I want to be specific about that. And as the leader of a nonprofit organization, you are going to have to deal with whatever comes your way." And so, in leadership, in service, it's very difficult to sort of segment, well, that's their responsibility. That's not my responsibility. It's a very difficult thing to balance, especially when it all stops with you eventually. And even when you're the second line manager, when you're the third line manager, when you're right up front, but you got management responsibilities on top of that, I don't have boundaries. I have responsibilities that butt up against each other, and eventually I got to choose one or the other. Some people handle that better than I do, I guess. I guess one other thing that has helped me guide these decisions is I think I have spiritual memories, and I think each of you do. Things that give you a benchmark for what God has spoken into your life about over your time. So 3 for me. 1, when I was in high school, I did a missions project in Pittsburgh. I felt very strongly the call of God in my life, and I actually had this sort of dichotomy. Do I make a lot of money and give it away? God, can you call me to that? Or 2, do I serve on the front lines and ask people for money? That was sort of my question to God, and God said very clearly, I can raise up whatever money I want. I need you to be doing the actual work. I will give you what resources you need. And that was 16 years old. And I didn't know what to do with that. I lived my life, but I sort of had that memory of that conversation for myself. Second, was at Esperanza Health Center. We had devotions every single day, which is a blessing. It was 20 minutes. And I actually prayed. I said, the pastor who was leading the devotion said, give God an honest heart prayer. And this was May of 2007. And I said, use me, Lord, to transform the city into a place of refuge, prosperity, and joy, that your name would be glorified and your shalom will envelop the city like a cloud. And I said, I don't know what I want to do. This could be in HIV, this could be in finance, this could be as a teacher, this could be in education, this could be in politics, this could be, I don't know, I just want to be used. However that looks, and I want to be used for transportation, for transformation, for your glory. And that can happen 1,000 different ways, whether I'm coaching wrestling, whether I'm being kind to my son, or whether I'm in a classroom or managing a budget. One last thing about me, I guess I'll say, is how you deal with failure is really important. So for example, I quit wrestling. 6 months later, I sub-matriculated into the grad school of education at Penn. And I graduated the next year, and within 6 months I had a master's in education. So I was 22 years old, and I had a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and I had 23 years old, I was teaching courses at CCP, and a couple of my students were like, how old are you again? And yet, 2 years after that, my family was on WIC with my son. So I've had all of these amazing experiences, and I'm on WIC. a job, and I don't know what's going to happen next. Who was to say in 2004 that I would be standing here today in 2012, just having the chance to talk about my experiences? And I've heard a lot of people say, well, if you're faithful, God's going to bless you. Well, I've seen a lot of people die. I've seen a lot of people be disappointed. And for me, Isaiah 49:4 is my verse. Yet what is due me is in the Lord's hands, and my reward is with my God. So I'm going to work my tail off every single day, and how much money I make, where I live, what happens to my kids, what is due me is in God's hands, and my reward is with Him, and that can look however He wants it to look. And so instead of freaking out, which I did when I had a sequence of events, instead of questioning, like, this isn't linear, what happens next? You know it's not going to be linear. You know that where you're looking at right now ain't going to be what you look at in 5 years, ain't going to be look at what you're 10. You cannot project what will happen on your deathbed. All I want to say when I'm dying is I have seen how faithful God has been. That's my goal in life. What is due me is in the Lord's hands, so my reward is with my God. So let me talk a little bit about my school. So I was the finance director at Esperanza Health Center for 3 years, and I was able at Eastern, which I wouldn't say is a financial powerhouse in terms of training, I was able to gather the vocabulary to then apply it at the health center. So they basically needed somebody who understood the language of debits and credits and would have the guts to just put the time in and the work in and not know what was happening next. And I was able to do that for 3.5 years. And I heard God very clearly say, okay, Jake, it's time for you to go. And I had to tell my boss, God told me it's time for me to go. I don't know where I'm going next. And she said, what? And her jaw dropped. I said, well, I need to handle this transition with you. I don't know when that's going to happen. It could be a year from now. It could be 6 months from now. We sort of had some negotiating time, some conversations about how to manage that. I don't like finances. I don't like numbers in particular, and yet I was the finance director for 3 years of a $10 million organization. And for me, what motivated me in that process is power, as Saul Alinsky would say, comes from two places: organized people and organized money. And those two sort of ways of leading an organization will apply to a school, a health center, a community development organization, a university, how you organize your people and how you organize your money. And you can't lead an organization if you don't know how to lead with money. And you can't lead an organization if you don't know how to lead with people. And so that looks 1,000 different ways, but I said, I need to develop this skill set. I have the language, but I need the skills. And so I pursued that job even when they told me no a couple times. I need to learn the money. Because how you express your values as an individual and as an organization is how you spend your money. Budgets are a healthy thing. They help give you discipline, they help give you guidance, and they're an expression of your values. So, that is something that we have had to invest a lot of time in at Spruce Hill Christian School City Center Academy, Spruce Hill CCA. We have been a leading urban Christian school, not only in Philadelphia, but throughout the country. We are a K through 12 school. We have 270 students. My son goes there because it was a good school for him to go to. The private school 2 blocks away from me in Germantown was $17,000 a year. The public school 3 blocks the other way was not a safe place for him to be physically. The 2 charter schools we applied to, we were waitlisted out the door in multiples of 50. Many of the other Christian schools are safe places for kids, and yet the academic portion is a challenge when you're running a shoestring budget. And Spruce Hill, while we certainly operate within constraints, is an excellent place that's also accessible. And those two sort of are very much in tension with each other, both in terms of how we express ourselves to particular constituencies. Am I going to tell the donor that's going to help us provide scholarships that we're an excellent school or we're an accessible school? Am I going to tell the parent who's going to pay full price that we're an accessible school or we're an excellent school. How you manage those two things, I think, is both beautiful and very difficult. And I've had to come into this situation and try and resettle that conversation, because I came in to Spruce Hill because it was an excellent school. But there were lots and lots of people who were giving money because it was an accessible school. We fundraise $900,000 a year from individuals, churches, foundations, scholarship organizations. $900,000 a year is a lot of money. Our budget is $2 million, so almost half.
When you say an accessible school, what do you mean by that?
It's a great question. I mean, if you send your child and apply to our school, we will do our very best to meet your financial need where you're at. Our tuition is $6,000 a year for elementary school, and it's over $7,000 for high school. And yet we have people who pay $100 a month, and we have people who pay the full price. And for urban ministry, that's a very interesting balance. I'll say at Esperanza, 98% of our funds came from the federal government. 98% from Medicaid, Medicare, or grants. That's also a very different and unique way of how you look at funding, how you get your money, is critical to how you operate as an institution. So most urban ministries, urban explicitly Christian ministries, do not get 98% of their money from the feds. Most Christian schools, any school that actually has a tuition isn't going to try and meet you exactly where you're at financially from across the board. We have multiple families that pay less than the cost of one student and have 2 kids enrolled in our school. So how do you balance that? And that was a critical way of how we described our school in order to raise those sorts of funds. We had some key institutional partners and some individuals. But how do you manage that message of we are a place for poor kids to go to school? I'm speaking as simply as possible. So again, that is a hard thing of how you manage conversations around race, class, and education delicately when you have people from all different perspectives and conversations that are coming at it from a different place. So in one sense, we could say our school is good enough for poor kids. Give us your money. But how about this? Our school is good enough for your kids, and give us some money to help serve other kids. How you describe our school is a huge challenge in terms of how you reach out and fundraise, and yet respect. My son goes to this school because this is an excellent school in the city. And to be that, you can think about that for your own son, your own daughter, to this place. This is a good place not only for your kids, but your funds as well. Because most people who give money, or even their time, are not fully invested in it themselves. Let me put my time into this, let me do this missions trip, but I ain't living here. Let me put my money into this, but I ain't sending my kid to that school. And to respect that, and to honor that, and yet to challenge it at the same time. And for me at least, has been a real challenge. But I think it honors everyone. I think it honors the people who've written, the guy who's written the $50,000 check. Like, I can tell him this is a good place for your own kids if you're living here. And the family who is living in a transitional homeless shelter and pays $100 a month, I can say this is a place that we can offer you that's safe for your kids. So urban ministry is oftentimes either going to be kids that are, or any constituency, whether it's the kids, the grown-ups, whoever the housing development that you're doing, is it going to be all one group or all the other? Is it going to be only for poor folks who can't afford it, or is it only going to be for the people who have the money to pay for it in the first place? And to do the two of those together, I think, is particularly beautiful and particularly challenging. And we have the opportunity to do that. A third of our families pay full tuition. Now, what does that say about our school? At the most expensive urban Christian school in the city, a third of our families pay full price. It's either, wow, a third of our families are actually able to afford that, and they care about our school enough, or man, only a third of our families can pay for that? Why can't we have all of them pay for that? Which one is the amazing thing about education in the city? And that's something that we've had to really grapple with. At least I have, and this is only my first year here. I will stop here and just give you a couple of sort of academic reference points for myself. We talked about spiritual memories. There are also sort of academic ones. And I think the most basic one for me is Jim Collins in he's written a number of good books, but the one that was started it off was Built to Last. And he said, great organizations embrace the tension of and. They embrace things that are seen. Are you going to be cheap, low cost, or are you going to be high quality? Which one are you going to be? And the genius companies, the great companies, are the ones who do both. So our school, the question is, are we going to be an excellent school, or are we going to be an accessible school? Which fundamental dynamic are we going to embrace? And I want to push us as a school to say we're going to do both. We are going to be excellent and accessible. We are going to embrace those tensions. For myself personally, the genius of and that I need to embrace personally is I need to be an excellent leader, and I need to be an excellent dad and husband. I have to do both. I can't sacrifice my family for my job. That does not honor them. And I cannot sacrifice my job for my family, and I've lost the stewardship of 270 kids and all the neighborhoods and all the friends. I can't do one or the other. It's like the scene at the end of any perilous movie, and it's like the bad guy's got the damsel, and he's like, I'm gonna get her, I'm gonna get her. And the good guy's like, oh no, like which am I gonna sacrifice the whole city and give up the keys to the town to save this one person? You know, that really, does that make sense? That tension? You're gonna sacrifice everything for this one person. You can't. That's a hard question you gotta be able to ask yourself. Like that's a real life thing. Like, am I gonna go home now because the kids gotta go to bed? Or am I gonna stay later? Or do I how do I tell them, wait, this time I have to stay, are you gonna be okay? Like, how you balance the tension at the end of the movie, at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, throughout your life, that's my own personal tension. I think our tension as a school that you have to embrace. You cannot run to one or the other, and I think be built to last, be good to great, all those cliches. If you're not going to embrace two things that are contrasting, people and money, contrast. You're going to give the manager who wants, the extra staff member because she says things are going to run right, or are you going to manage the budget down and say we have to have a profit of 5%, otherwise we don't grow? Which one are you going to manage? So I'm going to show the video of our school. We were able to get a good deal on the video, and we presented this at our annual benefit. We raised $200,000 at our benefit at the National Constitution Center in May, which was amazing. And so we played this video, and then I gave a talk about our school. And so I want to have a discussion here about your genius of and. So what are the things that you have in tension, either personally or at your school, your organization? What do you have to grapple with that are not fundamentally aligned? How do you manage those two things? For us, excellence and accessibility. I think one of the things that we struggle with is how to do both to various audiences. For some people, we're very accessible, but they wouldn't send their kids to our school. Some people were very excellent, and they don't know about the financial aid that we've offered. And we have to have the same conversation fundamentally to anyone and be that same person. So that's something that we're grappling with. So I'm asking you, what is your genius event for you personally? What is your genius event for your organization? What tensions do you embrace? So I want to show the video and basically show how we've tried to manage that in this video. And then I want to open it up for discussion. And we have about 20 minutes to do that. So the video is about 4 minutes, and we'll have about 15, 20 minutes to kind of talk it through, take questions, all that good stuff. All right. Sharon, do you mind getting that? All right. So, here we go. Just as there is opportunity, unlike any other, to do education in the city, there's also need, unlike any other. The city exists in the convergence of great destruction, but yet great joy. And few institutions have the opportunity to stand in the middle.
We have lots and lots of struggles to bring quality education to children. And when I think of Spruce Hill Christian School, I think of a model of what it could be.
When I came to Spruce Hill, there was a sense of order and belonging that was far beyond my expectation. We're graduating the high school students at some of the top colleges in the country.
We have been teaching the kids that you're preparing now for later.
Preparing us for college in every way. He's always ready to help us prepare for life outside of CCA.
Because of the teachers here, it brings up everybody. Mr. DeBoer, this is my first teacher that I really let it all out, like all my feelings, and instead of hiding myself up, I let him see the real side of me.
The city exists in the convergence of great destruction.
I never had many people to talk to at home, so the teachers always gave me guidance. They always coached me through problems in life.
At my old school, a couple of years ago, people were kind of mean.
The convergence of great destruction, but yet great joy.
When someone's hurt, we make them feel good, like brothers and sisters. So
when somebody gets hurt, we make sure they're okay, and the person who made them get hurt is okay too.
It was the people who helped me to just hold together.
If I hadn't came here, I probably would have been in jail or something. I probably wouldn't have been the person I am right now.
We might fight and get on each other's nerves and argue and bicker and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, we still love each other. We're still a family.
School's motto is Lux Urbi, which means light to the city. We're not going to ask our kids in the city to run away from life. We're going to ask our kids in the city to see with clear eyes the life around them.
To convey to the kids, to be able to go out as a light to the community, as a light to the country, and actually be it.
Spruce Hill CCA will reach out to families who have deep financial needs, and that's why we uniquely require the partnerships of God's people to invest in their lives and make good education possible for them. It's a rare find.
Every donor wants to give to something that's going to be around for a while. You couldn't do better than investing in Spruce Hill Christian School.
At the end of the day, we still love each other. We're still a family.
Everyone cares because it's like once you're in Spruce Hill, you know, they just remember you, and even if you leave, they'll never forget you because you're one special person.
So we spent $11,000 and a week of our time to produce that. And we received a grant, and we applied for the full amount of money, and we got $5,000 of it. And we can't afford to produce a video for our families, and then another video for our donors, and then another video for our parents. So another video, like we had one shot in 4 minutes to speak a message that made a difference for everybody, all of our stakeholders. And we had to talk about the good, and we had to talk about the bad, and we had to present ourselves in a way that sort of said, this is a good place to be, and this is also a place of need. Which one do you do? Which one do you emphasize? So I'd love your thoughts on this, and I'd love for you to talk about, just even for yourself, how you fit into your situation, your context, and how you have embraced tensions that are potentially in conflict and yet need to be together for there to be health and wholeness in the life around you.
I had questions about the video. The
Sure.
person who did it,
Mhm.
how much did they need to be involved to actually understand the culture of your school so that they can perform their best for you?
We spent a couple days with discussions over the course of some time, and then we, in video production, you overfilm, and then as a part of the editing process, you have multiple rounds that you're reviewing.
So you got the final product that you wanted.
It's never done, but that's our final product. Yeah, I hope so.
Your school is located in like the university city portion of the city. Do you serve children from all over the city, or do you focus, I guess especially for those that receive scholarships or financial aid to attend your school, do they come from the immediate community? Where?
Our primary, so we have 2 campuses. Spruce Hill was formed independently. In 1978 was at 42nd in Baltimore, in University City. And CCA was founded in 1983 independently, and they merged in 2007. So we are a school. I'm responsible for our entire program. Folks at the high school are a little more diffused throughout the area. Folks at Spruce Hill are generally west of the city and inner ring suburbs.
Okay.
And there's, as you know, University City has been more gentrified. And so, interestingly, I think we have a great opportunity to be a safe location in the city where anybody can go to. And you feel comfortable that this is a good place for your kids, and yet it's accessible by car, by public transportation. And so that's true for both of our locations, which isn't always true. If I had a school in the heart of North Philly, I would approach maybe enrolling a little differently.
And story, here's one that'll get you thinking because it directly affects you. In many ways, in the School of Leadership and Development, we face a very similar challenge. Eastern University has worked through the School of Leadership and Development to advance its mission to serve and make accessible its education in the countries of the Global South. And so Eastern has had a commitment to provide the same education you get for at an 80% discount sometimes, particularly for people who live in countries in the Global South. And the only way and reason we can do that is because you pay. It's a very similar situation. We've decided that we've committed that what we have to offer is good for the world. We believe it's good for the world. We believe that the education you get is an amazing education. We want it to be an amazing education. And we know from people in the Global South that they want exactly the same thing. but when we look at the differences in the cost of living and the different challenges of their economies, there's no way they can get it, first of all, by coming here. So we take it there. And there's no way they can pay the full tuition that Eastern offers. So Eastern is committed to doing this. And we were doing this before we started the organizational leadership domestic program. But what makes it sustainable is that students who are in the US or who come from Europe and come to that program can get financial aid so they can pay full price. But students in the Global South, there's no way they can.
And I think for us, to avoid, students come because it's worth it, right? So instead of focusing on spending more time on recruitment, you have to go deeper into the quality of the programming. So we have a debate team. Let's make that debate team even better. We're not going to be state championship football team, but let's make our choir program that much better. That regardless of, the only way you're going to attract folks to actually come here is because they know that it's worth it, because the quality is there. And I think that that's how we've been able to balance some of that.
And for Eastern University, and for you, what makes our programs at Eastern University so relevant is because of what we do abroad, as well as what we do here. For many people, they've only heard about many programs like the MBA, because of what we've been able to do abroad internationally. And so this program exists and continues to thrive because of what we give away. And what we give away is what we can continue to give away because of what we do here. It's really like they don't exist without each other. They don't thrive and they don't serve any of us well if both parts don't work. Okay. So the kinds of arguments we're used to making, like, well, that's not fair, or, well, that means I'm subsidizing somebody else, really it doesn't apply to this kind of and situation, because essentially what we're saying is what makes Eastern's master's programs that and Eastern University, because one of the things we've often said too is that many people argue that Eastern University is in some ways better known internationally than it is throughout the country. And part of that is because of what we've been able to do overseas. And the only reason we can do it overseas is because Eastern has made a commitment to serve at a cost that's accessible. And so we're often taught to look at, and we often look at these kinds of issues as if it's an either-or situation. But I think our situation says very clearly that the only reason we serve well, the only reason our programs are as good as they are, is because of the way these two different kinds of deliveries, the international and the domestic, feed and support one another. Many of our donors are donors because of what we do abroad.
So my question to that is, how do Spruce Hill Center City Academy, how do you get those that can afford, whether they have children or not, to want to, especially I guess those that do have children, more so than those that don't, but those that, say in our situation, much like the domestic students at Eastern that, well, I didn't know, but now I do, support financially through my tuition or whatever, students in other countries. Wonderful. I have no issue with that. But how do you get parents who say every dime I have I need for my children, even if I can afford it, to say this is okay? Because I'm in a similar situation right now in my after-school programs with having to talk my executive management and help them understand that we cannot charge for the families that cannot afford beyond this, because this is all they have, you know.
I think it's quality. I think if whatever price you pay is worth it for the people who pay the full price, then you're doing a service not only for them, but for the kids who can't afford to pay the full price. That the conversation could either go, we have a program that, hey, families that can pay full price, come help us, and your kids will be a part of this dynamic interaction of, of an integrated socioeconomic community. So really, the full pay families are secondary to the partial pay families. Or you could focus on the full pay families, and we're going to do our darndest to attract them as much as possible in order to make the quality of our program better for everybody. So like which group you end up focusing on in some way is like I think will that is a critical conversation we're having right now in my organization.
So the allure of your organization, of your school, is the integrated socioeconomic situation that's at the school?
There is not a singular allure, because I think there have been isolated conversations. For some, like we've had the conversation exclusively that this is an excellent school for your kid. And that's where it starts and stops, because of the quality of the program. And for some, we have a conversation of this is a school that offers massive amounts of financial aid. And I think that as we grow, those conversations need to happen together all the time. So that's something that we're evolving in and developing as an organization. To not have one person look at us from one angle and have another person look at us from another angle. Like this is who we are to everyone, and everyone has a place to be a part of our community. Does that make sense? What I'm giving you is a year after me sort of thinking this through a lot, and saying there are all these divergent conversations, let's bring them together. There's something in the middle.
I was going to say, you made a comment about the quality of your program,
right,
focusing on specific social-economic groups. My question is, why do you need to focus on either or of the groups?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't the quality of your program speak for itself?
The quality of your program doesn't matter as much for people who can't afford full price.
That's true.
The quality of your program is essential to get people who can pay full price to actually be there, especially in education when you've got a government-funded free program. Like, as long as we are better than, if we are only better than bad schools, then charter schools come in and their reputation, whether they're good or not, all of a sudden, even the family that's paying $200 says, I'm saving that money because I got to pay the bills in this other. So that affects everyone, because this is a tuition-based school, whether they're paying full price, and in some suburban locations, the only thing you can say is that we're a Christian school. And that's the difference maker. I think for us as an urban school, we can say that, but you haven't heard me talk about that nearly as much, right? But that is a critical piece. We are a Christian school that offers an excellent program. And that's not true for everybody.
So you're saying that the people that have low economic income, I would say, I guess, you're interested in your school because of the financial aid on it?
They couldn't afford, okay, so if you charge $200 a month that almost everybody's going to pay, then you're losing all the other income that people could have been paying if they could have afforded, that they might be able to afford. On the other hand, if you charge this much, you have the flexibility of offering financial aid along a spectrum. And you're asking people to pay as much as absolutely possible in order to build a strong foundation for your organization. And that's what happens in a lot of Christian schools, is they charge tuition as low as possible to be accessible. But what about the family that can only pay $100? Well, you're not accessible to them. And what about the family that can pay $600 a month? You're not accessible to them either, because they're not sending their kid to your school.
I think your point was, it sounded as if Jake was saying they don't care about the quality.
Yes.
I don't think that was the point. Is the first issue is well, of course they care about the quality. They want kids to come.
But their options aren't nearly as good. So it's like, I've got a really terrible school, and this one's sort of better. I'm going to go for the sort of better one.
Right.
Because your alternative is so bad. That anything better. If it's a safe place for my kid that they're not going to get beat up, I don't even care if they learn, at least they're not going to get beat up. So, like, that's not okay. Like, you need better options than that. But the only way you can provide a better option than being better than a bad school, I think for us, at least in our economic situation, is to have an integrated family of people that are tenured professors and lawyers and firefighters, and they come to our school because, and they could potentially have better options elsewhere.
Better option as far as what?
So they're free public school, or they could maybe even pay more for a more elite private school.
Well, but that's not what people are looking for in education. If I have my kids, I'm looking for that diversity, that a good.
Not everybody looks for diversity. Well, that's what I was looking for. And that's one of the reasons why I traveled 25 minutes out of my way when I was working at Esperanza to go there. But not everybody's looking for it. And that's something that we actually need to grow more. Become a more deeply diverse school.
When it comes to money, do you just rely on donors? Can you get federal funds at all?
We get federal funds for textbooks. Or maybe state, we get government funds for textbooks and maybe some professional development, but nothing like core program. And transportation is
I have a question. So I didn't understand the location until she asked the question, but looking at the video and looking at, I guess, looking at the video, it seemed like that school was somewhere in North Philadelphia. But now that I know it's off of 42nd in Baltimore, I went to the University of Penn for undergrad, so I know about the gentrification. It's almost like Brooklyn. You know, Brooklyn 15 years ago was a lot different than Brooklyn now in certain parts of Brooklyn. And there's a school somewhere off of 42nd, 3rd, and Locust. So, okay, so you all compete with that school as well? So, okay, so knowing what I know now, the video, it just focused on, I guess, the demise of different neighborhoods. That's off of like Woodland and stuff like that.
I hope we didn't focus just on the demise of different neighborhoods, and that is when you're grappling with the tension, right? Some people are going to pick up on different things that come across. I think the tension of destruction and joy, like, really forces you, like, you're probably going to side towards one or the other of those.
I guess based on my baggage, probably.
Well, exactly. Everybody's coming from their own personal context to that particular video or my own talk, and you're coming with your own baggage, your own context, and it's going to pick up on one, right? So we have to be able to talk about need.
Right.
Because if people aren't like, we can't offer scholarships if people aren't willing to support it. So there is absolutely need.
Right.
But we also have to talk about the beauty of this school. And how we do that is a hard conversation. Like, this is not a straightforward dialogue that we're having here.
Right.
That I'm hammering on one particular message, and, you know, maybe one misstep, and the donor sees this conversation and he says, wait, Jake's describing something I wasn't quite aware of. I'm not going to fund that school anymore. So it's a tricky conversation.
It's funny though, because it's Philadelphia, and what's in the video could be 18 blocks west or 18 blocks north.
Right. It could be, but it's not 42nd in Baltimore.
But 18 blocks west it is, and 18 blocks north it is. Yeah. I mean, you know, Philly changes so quickly, the neighborhoods go, city changes.
Right. Looking at that video and now knowing what I know now, you know, it just seemed like it was in North Philadelphia, and here's your safe haven. This is, you know, there's really no real alternatives, you know what I mean? You know, I could have been in jail and things like that, and kids living in that. I mean, those houses go for $400,000 now.
But
you
not
know
all
what I
those
mean?
children come, but I think though, that's a Philadelphian baggage, and just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, because we're in a city of neighborhoods, and we're not like Brooklyn. You know, I discussed this a little bit earlier in one of our smaller groups. We don't really venture out of our neighborhood. So I'm looking at Spruce Hill and I'm thinking, I'm from above Market Street. Most likely my kids aren't coming down to Spruce Hill. because they don't even know anything about Spruce Hill, because they don't go below Market Street.
Okay.
But I'm thinking, if you are on Woodland Avenue, even if you don't live right there, 42nd or 43rd and Baltimore Pike, you know that, you've passed that, you're comfortable in that neighborhood, and you didn't know you had that option. So, I mean, but I see what you're saying too, because it did feel like you were underneath the like Allegheny part.
Yes,
of
yes,
the
yes,
Elder
yes,
Ken-
yes,
Yes, no, so
yeah.
I get what you're saying, but I think that's also a part of our, and I don't know where you're from, but for me, that Philadelphian baggage that we sometimes have of, this is one neighborhood and that's not really University City, but there's parts of University City that's kind of rough, you know, we call it the bottom, but it's University City.
Right.
We call it Mantua, but it's University City, you know, so it's still part of that UPenn home.
Mantra.
Yeah, Mantua, but when I grew up, it was called the bottom.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
but that's still University City. So is that our own baggage, or is that really their reality? And I think there's a fine line. And I see what both you guys
On
are
that
saying.
video, you saw Allegheny Avenue, Center City, 17th Spruce, Germantown.
Yeah.
You saw West Philadelphia, you saw South Philadelphia, you saw all over the city. And that was intentional. One of the things when I was at Eastern and I was studying, they hammered on us that you have to be relevant in the blocks directly around your organization. Maybe. It depends. And we are a school for the city. We need to be accessible to people throughout the city. And we need to be competitive in the blocks directly around our school. And people who are going to drive 25 minutes out of their way as well. So we didn't, I mean, I didn't think that was our main, we wanted to say that we exist as a school beyond our walls. I think that was the main thing we needed to discuss.
What is, do you have a particular recruitment strategy for other neighborhoods besides that university area? Because if I had kids and, you know, based off of your video, I was impressed, by the way. And I wanted to inquire or
Impressed
send
because you
my
want to give your
school-
money, impressed because you want to give your kids.
Yeah, because I want to send my kids there.
I'm not use your financial aid for my kids.
No,
Yeah,
no,
we've got
not
openings.
even knowing about the financially, just
Yeah,
off of that
right.
video.
Right.
What is your recruitment? Do you have a recruitment strategy for other
We don't have enough
neighborhoods?
space. So we could have 40 kids in kindergarten next year and we can only have room for 20.
That's a waiting.
In only, in certain grades.
Right.
So we've got capacity for 284 kids next year, and we'll probably have, no, 294 kids next year, we'll probably have 284. So you've got an opening in 7th grade, you have 2 openings in 5th grade. You know, so it's very tight. And word of mouth, really. Like, the better we are, the more people are going to talk about us. You know, the good, you know, Harvard doesn't need to advertise.
Right.
Well, why can't we say because of Spruce Hill?
Yeah.
Why can't we say because of the CCA? Well, shoot. And University of Pennsylvania offers better financial aid than Eastern University because they have $1 billion endowment and because of all the people who are paying $40,000 for tuition, not 30. And they can say you can come here with no loans if you can't afford it because of your endowment and because other people pay a really high tuition because it's worth it.
I guess I'm that Ann, you know, because I wasn't even going to go to school because I didn't have the money. I went to Milton Hershey. I was the National Honor Society president, and people were like, "Where are you going to school?" And I'm like, "I don't have any money, you know. My mom's on welfare." But you know, I applied I'm from Harrisburg, so you know, that's a small enough town in Philly. So when I came here, you know, people were, I'm like, "What do you mean you're just from South Philly? What about all over Harrisburg? We're all over the place." And you know, I'm that Ann because I'll never forget when I applied. I was thinking about ROTC because I decided against the Naval Academy because someone told me I wouldn't succeed. So I listened, and I applied, and lo and behold, I got a University of Penn education for probably $6,000.
So let me speak, coming from both, right? So I went to both schools, and I work in a school. I had more profoundly meaningful classes here at Eastern than I did as a student.
In what way? I'm sorry, I just let the grab.
I had one class that had content. It was a tremendous content class. Another class I had vision. It made sense in my life and how to make sense like in the city. And relevance, the focus of the class. Like if you're studying finance to run a nonprofit, or you're studying finance to go to Pepsi, those are two different ways of thinking about making sense of these numbers. I also had to write the syllabus for one of my professors one time on the chalkboard.
At Penn?
At here.
Oh, here?
Because she was totally unprepared. I also had a class at Penn, an advanced methods course, where the professor almost cried because she was so intimidated by the students. I had a student at Eastern discuss circular logic with one of the professors using circular logic. It was like, and I had some knucklehead friends at Penn. I'm like, how did you get in here? What is your problem? Like, that.
How much do you have?
I'm not going to say that all, like, my experiences were exactly the same. But I'm going, wherever I'm going, I'm going to put my entire self into that. And you make the value of whatever investment you make. I was in HIV care for 2 years. Some people do HIV care for their entire lives. For me, HIV was the most complicated administrative thing I could do at the time. I didn't have a passion for HIV care. Lots of other people did, and I got to support them in it. But I went all out, and I got hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants for that organization that we would not have gotten otherwise if I wasn't busting my tail. Not that all on me, God provided, right? So whatever situation you're in, whether my Eastern MBA was deeply valuable for me in my life. So was my Penn education, but it's only because of what you've made out of it. So I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. It's each individual student and what you really make of it. And that's true of any school, and I think that's true of our school. We have a student who got a full ride to St. Joe's University, full entire ride. Another student got a full ride to Wheaton College. And these folks who could not afford schools. We've had folks go to Penn. We've had folks go to Eastern. We got recruited by the Templeton Honors College. They could send some of our kids here. We're doing that because we care about the kids, because we're invested. Our mission statement is beautiful. I know we're running late. Our mission statement is this: we train students' minds, disciple their hearts, and bring light to the city, one child at a time. Cut through all the jargon. We train minds, disciple hearts, bring light to the city, one kid at a time. And that's what you can do in your program. Cut through all the other jargon. Who am I? I'm Jake. I've got a family that God has called me to that I love deeply, and I ain't getting rid of. They might kick me out. And I got a school. I don't have a lot of other hobbies. That's just me. But I'm doing those two things, and I'm doing them as well as possible, by the grace of God. So I think that that's true in your classes, right? Are you gonna sort of like wait till this seminar is over tomorrow and just, oh man, thank God I'm done? Or are you gonna really be a pain in your teacher's ass and actually like keep asking questions? I would rather have that. I teach community organizing at Penn now. And so I get these folks
Kendall's got that on lock.
who come here and they say, give me all the information so I can spit it back at you. That's called banking. I want to pose problems. If you don't know how to ask a question and then answer it, all your ability to memorize don't mean squat. The hardest thing you'll do in your dissertation is to figure out what you're actually studying, what question you're trying to answer, or whatever thesis you're doing. What question are you trying to answer? And that's why context is so important. What am I actually trying to figure out? And we didn't ask that question in some ways in our school. Which one are we focused on? How do these two interrelate? What questions are we asking about ourselves? To then figure out the answers. My prayer to you today is that you would see and hear what God would have you see and hear. Good decision makers are not the people who can figure out what's better, A or B. Anybody can do that. Good decision makers are the people who can figure out A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, and then you find out that it was a totally different option? What do you perceive? What is the breadth of your ability to perceive that will help you make the best decision? And that's just basically by asking question after question after question. Off mic. So glad.